Everyone knows that all assets will eventually be tokenized. And this means things like stocks, bonds, and even real estate will eventually trade 24/7 as tokens on blockchains, just like cryptocurrencies. The only question is which blockchain will host these tokenized assets? Hyperliquid aims to be the answer. Its scalable DEX has been smashing records in DeFi and could eventually do the same in TradFi. And that's why today we're going to do a deep dive into Hyperliquid, looking at who is behind it, how it managed to launch without any VC funding, and how high its Hypecoin could go in 2025 and beyond. My name is Nick. Stay tuned. I'll start by saying that nothing in this video is financial advice. It's educational content that's intended to inform you about Hyperliquid. And I'll also note that nobody at Team Coin Bureau holds Hype in their portfolios at the time of posting, at least. But some of us may add Hype to our portfolios in the future. And if you want to know which cryptos we hold and which ones we're personally considering accumulating, then you can become a member of the Coin Bureau Club using the link in the description. Now, we also review promising small caps there too, so it's well worth checking out. With that said, let's start with a bit of a background. Now, the history of Hyperliquid begins with Jeffrey Yan. Jeff holds a bachelor's in mathematics from Harvard University and previously worked at Google and a Wall Street trading firm named Hudson River, where he developed trading algorithms. Jeff has explained in interviews that he got into crypto in 2018 because of Ethereum. Back then, prediction markets were all the rage, and Jeff tried to launch his own Layer 2 prediction market on Ethereum. Unfortunately, it didn't quite work out, and he scrapped the project after a few months. And that's when Jeff decided to get back into trading. In early 2020, he founded a crypto trading firm and market maker named Chameleon Trading, which he claims became very big. And that's why it's interesting that there's almost no information about Chameleon Trading, at least not public info. Archives of what appears to be Chameleon Trading's website only have a single sentence, which reads, quote, "Global proprietary trading and investment firm," with a link to an email address if you want to get in touch. Jeff also doesn't have Chameleon Trading noted as experience on his LinkedIn profile. In any case, Jeff had said that Chameleon Trading got interested in DeFi in late 2022 after they noticed that trading volumes were still quite high on DEXs despite the crypto bear market. After FTX collapsed, they decided to launch a decentralized exchange focused on derivatives to fill the void that was left. For context, FTX was a derivatives-focused centralized exchange. Now, as you probably know, Hyperliquid was the name that they chose for their derivatives DEX. What you may not know, though, is that Hyperliquid originally launched on Arbitrum, one of the biggest Layer 2s on Ethereum. And this explains why accounts are funded via USDC on Arbitrum. And it also gives us some clues about Hyperliquid's affiliations. More on that at the end of the video. Anyways, shortly after, Hyperliquid decided to launch its own Layer 1 blockchain to make its DEX as scalable as possible. For reference, Hyperliquid was first revealed in late 2022 and announced its own Layer 1 in early 2023. By the end of 2023, it had surpassed over $50 billion in total trading volume. And that reminds me, Hyperliquid has a second co-founder who goes by the pseudonym Iliensek. Hyperliquid's documentation notes that Jeff and Iliensek were classmates and suggests that Iliensek also has an impressive trading experience. It's not clear if Iliensek was also a founder of Chameleon Trading. He or she has kept a very low profile. On that note, Hyperliquid has claimed that it has received no VC funding and that it is fully self-funded. And this means that there was apparently no ICO or pre-sale of the Hype coin. Hype only launched in November, with over $1 billion of it being airdropped to eligible users and community members. Trading volume on the Hyperliquid DEX subsequently exploded, along with the price of Hype, creating a lot of, well, hype. By December 2024, Hyperliquid's total trading volume had surpassed $600 billion, and Hype had hit a market cap of almost $10 billion. And this begs the question of if the hype is worth it. Before we unpack the answer, smash that like button if you're enjoying this video so far, and subscribe to the channel and ping the notification bell so you don't miss the next one. Now, this ties into how Hyperliquid works. In case you missed it, Hyperliquid uses its own layer 1 that's been optimized for DEX trading. To that end, it can process up to 200,000 transactions per second. This seems plausible given that it has a block time of just 0.2 seconds, apparently the fastest in crypto. As most of you know, though, this kind of speed comes with certain trade-offs, specifically security, decentralization, or indeed both. And in Hyperliquid's case, it seems to have sacrificed decentralization. And that's because Hyperliquid reportedly only has just 4 validators. But for what it's worth, this was recently increased to 16. It's not entirely clear who was running these 4 validators, but chances are it was Hyperliquid or the Chameleon trading team, and there have been many memes to that effect. For what it's worth, the Hyperliquid Foundation is in the process of selecting a new set of 16 validators for Hyperliquid. And this process may be complete by the time you see this video, so just do keep that in mind. Regardless, besides extreme centralization, the secret to Hyperliquid's speed is its novel proof-of-stake consensus mechanism dubbed HyperBFT. As a fun fact, HyperBFT is the result of improvements made to the Tendermint consensus mechanism used by Cosmos blockchains, at least to our understanding. FYI, Hyperliquid actually used a Tendermint-based blockchain when it initially launched its Layer 1. Speaking of proof of stake, Hyperliquid only recently launched staking. Its documentation notes that the minimum self-stake for validators is currently 10,000 Hype, which works out to nearly $250,000 at the time of shooting. Thankfully, delegation is possible, but the documentation does not specify what the minimum for delegation is. As it happens, the documentation specifies that the delegation lockup time is 1 day, but does not specify what the lockup time is for validator staking. And not only that, but even though the delegation lockup is only 1 day, documentation specifies that moving Hype coins to your spot account has a 7-day delay, and this means an 8-day lockup in total, technically. The good news is that there is no, quote, automatic slashing at the Layer 1 level, so validators and delegators can stake without worry. The bad news is that the staking rewards are only around 2.3% per year for validators and delegators. Oddly enough, this low staking reward was inspired by Ethereum. Anyhow, as you probably know, Hyperliquid is smart contract compatible and leverages EVM-style smart contracts. What you may not know, though, is that the EVM itself is limited to just a few hundred transactions per second. And that's why Hyperliquid had to create its own custom virtual machine, dubbed the Hyper EVM. In contrast to other EVM chains, though, Hyperliquid is not general purpose, at least not yet. And this means that it is not currently possible to do things like launch your own DEX on its blockchain. Hyperliquid's documentation notes that this kind of functionality is currently in testnet, so presumably will be available soon. For the time being, though, it seems that the primary purpose of Hyperliquid's EVM functionality is to make it easy to bridge USDC from Arbitrum. You might recall that this is how you fund your account on the DEX. What's wild, though, is that over 2 billion USDC has been bridged from Arbitrum to Hyperliquid so far. As for the DEX functionality, this is made possible by a series of modules that are built into the blockchain. And these include the clearinghouse module, an order book module, and an oracle module. As such, you can think of Hyperliquid as being a DEX blockchain with a super fast EVM slapped right on top. Using the DEX is super simple. You can easily sign up using your email address. No KYC is required, and of course you can fund your account using USDC on Arbitrum in case you forgot. Although Hyperliquid's focus is perpetual futures, it has started to offer a spot trade in pairs as well, and plans to add additional features. Speaking of which, you should know that Hyperliquid seems to have its own native meme coin called PER, as the documentation makes reference to it. As with Bonk, PER appears to be more than a meme coin, as it has a meme coin launchpad called HyperFun and a Telegram bot to trade the memes on said launchpad. Naturally, this has lots of people wondering if it's going to be the next pump.fun. Now, this relates to Hyperliquid's tokenomics. Hype is the native cryptocurrency coin of the Hyperliquid blockchain. It's used for staking and is apparently used for governance too. But Hyperliquid's governance process is not explained in its documentation, nor were we able to find a public governance dashboard. More importantly, some secondary sources note that a portion of trading fees on the DEX are used to buy back and burn the Hype coin, but this is not specified in the documentation, nor is it specified in the blog post detailing Hype's tokenomics. Meanwhile, the Hyperliquid website notes that the DEX is, quote, zero gas, meaning there are no on-chain fees. However, a post by the Hyperliquid Foundation on X specifies that, quote, Hype will be the gas token of the Hyper EVM. So, this suggests that the DEX aspects of the blockchain are gas-free, but the EVM aspects will have gas fees paid in Hype once it's launched. And this makes sense given that DEXs have trading fees. For those unfamiliar, the reason why most blockchains have fees is to prevent spam, like someone using a bot to submit 1 trillion transactions all at once. It seems that Hyperliquid's solution to this problem is to outsource this role to the DEX, whose fees ensure that there's no spam transactions on the actual chain. And this makes it possible to have zero gas fees on the actual chain. The more you know. But back to the tokenomics. Hype has a maximum supply of 1 billion, which was allocated as follows. 38% to future emissions and community rewards, including staking rewards. 31% to the, quote, Genesis distribution, aka the airdrop to early users and the community. 23.8% to current and future contributors. 6% to the Hyper Foundation, and the small remaining percentage to, quote, Hyperliquidity. Without getting too technical, Hyperliquidity makes it possible for anyone to launch a futures position on the DEX. And this is analogous to creating a liquidity pair for a new token on a spot DEX like Uniswap, for example. But the process is a bit different and a lot more complex. You can refer to the documentation for more info on that. Now, when it comes to the vesting schedule for Hype, the blog post announcing its tokenomics notes that 100% of the Genesis distribution was unlocked upon launch, and that, quote, core contributor tokens will be locked for 1 year after Genesis. Most vesting schedules will complete between 2027 to 2028. Some will continue after 2028. It's not specified which vesting schedules apply to which allocations. What is specified is that, quote, the Genesis distribution strictly excludes core contributors. There are no allocations for private investors, centralized exchanges, or market makers. At the same time, the recent announcement about the start of the staking rewards specifies that, quote, locked tokens may be staked, but their rewards are locked. Taken together, this suggests that there aren't any insiders that could profit from Hype, and that the soonest the team will profit is sometime in late 2025. To some, this is a good sign and a breath of fresh air. Now, finally, a crypto project that's building something for the people without caring about the profits. To others, this is a bad sign, because surely there's some profit motive involved for the Hyperliquid team. I mean, this makes the Hype token's launch a little suspicious. The skeptics have pointed out that Hype's price should have collapsed as its initial supply was, of course, airdropped, but it didn't, which is slightly odd. And this has many asking questions, and they've actually been asking them for quite a while. In a 2023 interview, Jeff was asked about the team's profit motives, and he initially hesitated to answer the question. But after the host pressed him a bit, Jeff admitted that the answer would be the Hype coin, which would accrue value because of all the trading on the Hyperliquid DEX and its other dApps. But as I just mentioned, the Hype coins allocated to core contributors are locked for 1 year. Any staking rewards they accrue are also locked, and the Genesis distribution excluded core contributors, meaning the team wasn't eligible for the airdrop. So, where exactly is the profit motive? I mean, after all, the crypto bull market could potentially be over by the end of 2025, and the team presumably knows this. And what about the incentive for exchanges to list the Hype coin? It stands to reason that most would probably not, because Hyperliquid is technically a direct competitor to CEX's. Surely there must be at least a few insiders, right? Well, we think there might be, and that Hype's stable price action could be some evidence for this. And that's just because of Hyperliquid's history. To refresh your memory, Hyperliquid was essentially founded by Chameleon Trading, a crypto market maker and trading firm that was supposedly very big but keeps a very low profile. It's possible that Chameleon Trading has been very active on the Hyperliquid DEX. If so, then Chameleon Trading could have received a significant portion of the initial Hype allocation. Assuming that the Hyperliquid team is still involved in Chameleon Trading, then it's possible that this is how they're profiting from the Hype token. Other crypto insiders could have used a similar strategy. This ultimately depends on whether market makers and/or traders on the Hyperliquid DEX count as core contributors. If they don't, then this could be evidence of a loophole being used by the team and other insiders to profit from Hype, while giving the appearance that they're being altruistic. The reason why we mention all of this is because it has profound implications for Hype's potential in the short and long term. In the short term, it could mean that Hype will appear stronger than other cryptos, but only because insiders aren't selling. Newsflash, but this is the kind of price action we've been seeing so far. On the flip side, it could mean that the Hype token will underperform in the longer term as insiders finally start selling their allocations. As such, we believe that the Hyperliquid team ought to clarify whether they received any Hype coins indirectly via Chameleon Trading's market making or trading activities. But for the sake of today's video, let's assume that they didn't and that everything about the team not profiting and there being no insiders is 100% true. If this is the case, then Hype's potential fundamentally depends on how much adoption the Hyperliquid DEX receives. So far, there's been lots of adoption. Assuming that the up and to the right trading volume that Hyperliquid has experienced so far is completely organic and unrelated to any market makers or trading firms affiliated with insiders, and that this trading volume continues its current trajectory, then Hype could potentially become as large as Binance BNB did in the previous cycle. To put things into perspective, BNB hit a market cap of around $100 billion. And if Hype is following BNB one cycle behind, then it could rally by more than 12 times from its current price, as Hype currently has a market cap of around $8.3 billion. And that would translate to a price of around $300 at the cycle top. However, if most of the up and to the right trading volume that Hyperliquid has experienced is inorganic and related to insiders or market makers, then the cycle top market cap is considerably lower and perhaps is already in. Let's hope, though, that the user count and trading volume are both legit and not being inflated in any way. Now, whether Hype will in fact follow BNB depends on its upcoming milestones. While Hyperliquid does not have an official roadmap, upcoming milestones can be found in interviews with Jeff. In a 2023 interview, Jeff said that they're hoping to launch a mobile app for the DEX, but noted that it will be difficult because of strict rules that app stores have around crypto. In a 2024 interview, Jeff said that Hyperliquid will eventually support native USDC, meaning that it will no longer be necessary to bridge USDC from Arbitrum to fund your account. Instead, you'll be able to fund your trading account using USDC from any chain, sending it to Hyperliquid via Circle's CCTP, its native cross-chain transfer protocol. In that same interview, Jeff revealed that there are no concrete milestones for Hyperliquid besides the ones we mentioned already, and that the team will essentially play it by ear when it comes to adding new features. What's bizarre, though, is that Jeff claimed that Hyperliquid has no competition. It's not the only bizarre thing he's said either. Another example is an interview from earlier in 2024 where Jeff claimed that there's no incentive for anyone to promote the DEX. And this is seriously strange given that you probably want people to have an incentive to promote the DEX so that the usage grows. And you could also make the case that Circle has an incentive to promote the DEX. And that's because Hyperliquid appears to have been one of the biggest demand drivers for USDC in recent months. I'll remind you that over $2 billion of USDC has been bridged to Hyperliquid via Arbitrum, something that can, of course, be verified on-chain. A Circle likely wants this figure to continue growing as it helps to compete against Tether. And this, of course, brings me to the challenges that Hyperliquid could face. And the first challenge is the elephant in the room, and that's its similarities to FTX. To be absolutely clear, we are not saying that Hyperliquid is a Ponzi scheme or fraud in any way. What we're saying, though, is that the project's origin story and structure are almost identical. For those unaware, FTX was founded by Alameda Research, which was also a crypto trading firm and market maker. Alameda became one of the biggest crypto market makers after it launched in 2017, and then launched the FTX exchange in 2019, where Alameda would make markets and, of course, trade. And of course, Sam Bankman-Fried was behind both. It was these blurred lines and the conflicts of interest that many took issue with, even very early on. Hyperliquid's story is almost identical. Chameleon Trading was founded in 2020 and supposedly became a big market maker after it launched. A few years later, Jeff launched the Hyperliquid DEX, where Chameleon Trading may or may not be making markets. Interviews with Jeff suggest the teams behind both are, or at least were, the same. And this ties into Hyperliquid's second challenge, and that's transparency. There is very little information about the Hyperliquid team and the Hyperliquid Foundation, and there is effectively no information about Chameleon Trading, much less its involvement in the activities on the Hyperliquid DEX. Our research suggests that the Hyperliquid team is based in Singapore and that the Hyperliquid Foundation is registered in the Cayman Islands. That's about it. Jeff is practically the only public member of the team. He hasn't done that many interviews and has even admitted that he keeps a very low profile. But obviously, the bigger issue is the opacity behind Chameleon Trading and the activity of other possible insiders, which, I'll reiterate, could have a profound impact on the Hype token's future potential. The opacity around the team and its affiliates could also limit the adoption of Hyperliquid and its DEX. Never mind that its documentation seems to be a bit inconsistent due to parts of it being quite outdated. Details about critical things like tokenomics are also objectively unclear. And this relates to Hyperliquid's third challenge, and that's competition. The elephants in this room are Solana and other scalable layer 1s. And these crypto chains may not be as scalable as Hyperliquid, but remember, scalability isn't everything. User experience is also important, and that's where Hyperliquid is lacking. Don't get me wrong, signing up for Hyperliquid is a walk in the park. However, getting your account funded with USDC on Hyperliquid is a march in the desert by comparison. You also need to remember the kind of people who will use a derivatives-focused DEX like Hyperliquid and understand its selling points. Most crypto users will stick to simple swap functions found in user-friendly wallets such as Phantom. Consider that swaps are even simpler than spot trading on a CEX. Derivatives trading is complex by contrast, and those who trade derivatives are more than likely to use a CEX than a DEX, at least for now. With all of that said though, Hyperliquid is a truly novel crypto project, and Hype could have some crazy potential if all its claims around organic growth and no insiders are genuine. From our perspective, though, there's some pressing challenges that need to be addressed for this potential to be realized. In our view, transparency is the lowest hanging fruit. It will go a long way towards increasing trust in the project, and this is especially true given Hyperliquid's uncanny similarities, in origin at least, to FTX. Any concerns related to these similarities would be easily put to rest with more transparency. With a bit of luck, this transparency will come, as well as all the other pending updates to the Hyperliquid blockchain itself. If so, then Hyperliquid will start to look more like Binance than FTX, and Hype could become the next BNB. Hopefully, this will be the case the next time we cover the project, and if so, then we may just start picking up some hype ourselves. Okay, if you enjoyed this video, here's another one you may enjoy right over here. And if you already subscribed, then give yourself a pat on the back. If you aren't, then pat the subscribe button right here first, then yourself. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon.